Botanical Arts is the fourth division in a flower show for the GCA, and there are a lot of changes, so you need to keep abreast to these changes by going on the GCA website and looking up the yellow book to make sure you're up to speed on what is allowed and what isn't allowed, and all the different changes. We are constantly adding rules and clarifying rules, so it's a great place to find the latest, greatest of all the rules. So in a division of a flower show, as I said, this is the fourth division, Division 4, and there are 4 different sections. Under the division of Botanical Arts, there are 4 categories: Botanical Couture, Botanical Embellishment, Botanical Forms, and then Botanical Jewelry. And what these are, Botanical Couture is a design emulating clothing and/or fashion accessories, and is created out of all dried plant material. The botanical embellishment is when a design is made by enhancing a man-made object with dried plant material. Botanical forms are designs of any other form that is not jewelry, couture, or embellishment, and made entirely from plant material, dried plant material. And botanical jewelry is a design created entirely from dried plant material and made to resemble wearable jewelry. So as far as the rules are concerned, as I said before, you really need to check the website on the GCA website to make sure you're up to date on the rules. But let me go over what we know as of 2025. All plant material must be dried. So this includes plants and what are not considered plants any longer, but fungi and algae. Under fungi, that includes mushrooms and lichen, and under algae, it includes seaweed and kelp. Those are allowed. You cannot use any artificial or locally invasive or endangered material. And that is in the state that the show is in. So in other words, in Massachusetts, if I were to make a design out of bittersweet, which is terribly invasive here, then it would not pass. You have to make sure and check the locally invasive list from the state that you're going to be exhibiting. Plant material may be processed, but only by the exhibitor. So in other words, you can't go to Lowe's and buy a dowel to create a heel of a shoe if you're making a shoe. But you could go into your backyard and take a branch or a stick and sand it into the shape of a heel by the exhibitor. You can do that yourself. The use of commercially processed material is also prohibited. So again, you can't go to a hardware store and buy a tile of cork or a skewer or a dowel. But there are some exceptions. We do allow natural raffia, not the plastic raffia, but the natural raffia. You're allowed to use rattan, which are the Middelina sticks that we like, but they are hard to find because they're no longer being manufactured. You can sometimes go on basket weaving sites and find rattan there. Skeletonized leaves are allowed, and rice, even white rice, is allowed. We also allow organic thread, as long as it's cotton or hemp, for stringing between beads or pearls of plant material. And it has to be plant material. You can't use silk. Mechanics may be used, but must not be visible. So in other words, you can use cardboard or wire, but you have to cover it with plant material. Gemstones must be made from plant material. There are some saps and resins from plants that you can use to create gems. Every once in a while, here's one, Indian white mahogany. You cannot use nail polish as a gem. You need to paint plant material to resemble gems. You can paint it with nail polish, but it just can't be all nail polish. It has to be just enhancing the plant material. A light coating of paint, nail polish, epoxy, and etc. is allowed on top of the materials. Decorative painting, where you're depicting scenes or figurines or faces, etc., is discouraged. We want you to use plant material to create the pattern. Plant material may be carved, cut, incised, or shaped to enhance artistic effect, but only by the exhibitor. So in other words, this dragon was done by cutting out all the negative space to create this cameo. But the judges do want you to put other plant material with that carved out piece. So in other words, again, this was done and then sesame seeds were applied and rattan on top of that before it was painted. Manufactured figural forms may not be used as a base material. You cannot go to the store and buy a turtle and then embellish it with plant material. We want to see the exhibitors to create the turtle out of either paper mache or clay and then enhance it with the plant material. What used to be called a key card is now called a sample card with the botanical and common names and properly use the nomenclature as listed in the GCA website, on the GCA website. And what we've done now and why we call it a sample card is that we're asking the exhibitor to note the location of the plant material within the design. So in other words, this exhibitor used rattan as links in her necklace. Exhibits must appear to be functional, which means necklaces need a clasp if they can't go over the head easily, and bracelets, etc. They do not have to be functioning. They just have to look like they work. They have to appear functional. For a brooch class, we do not expect a pin on the back of the pin because it will interfere with the staging. Now, going back to the embellishment and couture, one change that's made is embellishment is partially covered and couture is entirely covered. So embellishment is considered to be partially covered. You have the man-made object and you can sort of see the man-made object under there. Couture is entirely covered with plant material, made of plant material. Embellished objects should remain recognizable and not be completely obscured. We are trying to get to the point where judges can see, for instance, this beautiful design. Everybody loved this design, but it was to be a canoe that was embellished, and you can't see the canoe anymore. And so judges are trying to see the original piece underneath the plant material. Speaking of judges, the way these are judged, same as floral design, is the principles and elements of design. So for the principles of design, we have balance, symmetrical or asymmetrical, contrast, dominance, rhythm, scale, and for the elements of design, we have color and form, light and line, pattern and size, space and texture. I hope this helps you to understand botanical arts a little bit better, and again, check the GCA website under Yellow Book to find the latest rules and regulations.